But the actual alignment, it would be probably about November 4th. But it's still going to line up perfectly on October 31st because the sun didn't move that far, that fast.
Fritz,
So
because
your alignment date to see it is probably about a week in
is
there.
Fritz, is that does that help you date it at all? Like, are you able to look at these and because it's there's a movement of the alignment? Does that help date?
Yeah, it's about 2,000 years Earth wobble, and then it'll wobble back. So in another 1,000 years, 1,500 years, it'll be dead on to May 1st again.
So are you believing that these mounds and these earthworks in Newark are 2,000 years old, or are we talking how old do you think these are?
The earliest date that they had on the Newark earthwork, they sliced, part of the wall away, and they were saying 200 BC.
Wow.
But there was a woman that was part of that team, and she said that the carbon dating came back to 800 BC.
Hmm.
But because that didn't fit the paradigm of the
Right.
university,
Right.
that they left that evidence out and just went with the like, well, everything's 200 BC. They went with that, but it's much older than that. According to carbon dating, it's just, universities have their theory and then they have the evidence prove their theory, not the other way around. They talk about
Yeah.
their scientific method, but they're the last to adhere to that.
Right. It's more of it's the financial method, right? It's whoever footing the bill and fits the bill. That's
Yeah,
the
who's paying the grant?
Is the Newark Earthworks the most popular site in this whole area and the most important site?
Probably. And really, it's the newer earthwork that proves that the earthworks, geometric earthworks, were built by the Amorites.
See, this is what I want to talk to you about. So we talk about the biblical history a lot on our show, Fritz, and the conquest of Joshua, right, when he is cleansing the Holy Land of the giants. That there's this diaspora, there's this leaving. There's
Yes.
a lot of thoughts about the Amorites and other tribes of giants partnering with the Phoenicians, who were the sailors, the eminent navigators and sailors of the time, and leaving the ancient Near East. That to me is a great explanation for how we end up seeing a lot of this megalithic work and also things like the mounds here in North America. And as you talked about, they end up in the British Isles, right, in Ireland and
The
the
hinges
UK.
all over the
'Cause
world.
there's hinges everywhere, right?
Yeah,
And now we're finding what's fascinating is you can look at things like polygonal walls, right? The Cyclopean architecture which exists in Sardinia and Greece, and then it's here in South America. It's in Cusco. It's in Peru, right?
Yeah,
And then you
well,
look at things like
yeah.
hinges and stone circles, and they are everywhere.
Yeah, it's just like someone turned the light on the cockroaches and they all took off, right?
But nowhere in the numbers as you have, like hinges are, yes, they're in Germany, there's a hinge. That one's aligned to May 1st,
Interesting.
that hinge
Okay.
in Germany. But the hinges in Ohio or in Great Britain, they don't look any different than what you have in Ohio.
Mhm.
And it's just really since 2010 when I released the Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, that I was the first to start calling them hinges. It's like it's a hinge. It's a circular earthwork, interior ditch with a gateway aligned to a solar event. That's a hinge in England, but universities didn't want that vernacular because that associates England with here.
Right.
But it's the same thing. They're the same earthworks
Yeah.
doing the same things. I mean, we know Stonehenge has lunar for the 18.6 lunar alignments, and that's in Newark. And we'll talk about that when we go to our Newark map. So there's such a similarity, not even more than a similarity, because they're identical. In England, they have conical burial mounds with a ditch or earthwork that surrounds them. And that's what we have in Ohio. We have hinges in Ohio and we have hinges in England. So everything is identical, including the skeletal remains, where we're going to find tall skeletons with a protruding brow ridge and generally a sloping skull. Find that in England.
Yeah.
You find that in Ohio,
So
or
like
the Ohio Valley.
the Amorites left their calling card around. That's what you're saying.
They did, and nowhere so much as in Newark, Ohio, because the Amorites were known for their mathematics. They knew pi, they knew square roots, they had Pythagorean triangles, 1,000 years before Pythagoras ever came up with it. And it was necessitated by property, and they were having to survey, and people were buying property, and so they're surveying this land. And then we have surveying on a large scale at the Newark Earthworks. And it's more than that, but it's the Newark Earthworks is just really the easiest to explain how they pulled all this off. So they had pi, square root, Pythagorean's triangle. They had all these things that are going to play out at the Newark Earthworks. That is, as you say, the calling card of the Amorites. And the universities now have the position of, because when I first came out with the Pythagorean triangle was, attaching or drawing lines between the major earthworks there, that you got a Pythagorean triangle, just up and down. You're a racist. They didn't have that. What are you basing this on? Well, then about a year ago, Brad Lepper, who's head of Ohio Historical Connection, had the epiphany of, well, why couldn't Native Americans have the Pythagorean triangle? Because to believe that they couldn't in and of itself is racist.
Right.
So then we have Pythagorean there, and then Ball State University came out with that Winchester rectangular earthwork was also built using Pythagorean triangles. So now that came out, which I didn't even know, but it's just like, wow, okay, now we have two Pythagorean triangles. That's far more impressive than just having the one at Newark connecting them.
Right.
This was actually built.
One could be a one-off, right? But two then is a pattern, right? So you have something that's happening here. Yeah.
In my research, you always find that second one, then you have something.
You hit something.
Fritz, this might be like a little bit out of left field, but the hinges, we talked to one gentleman who actually moved to Egypt, and he said that the hinges were actually a lightning rod to supernaturally charge the area. And that's purpose for the ditch was full water. And then it's sort of...
It's like a diametric battery.
Yeah. Does that play into any of those thoughts, play into your work or what you think the hinges are for? And why are they building these things in such a mathematical way? It's not just random.
And I have a secondary question on top of that, Fritz, is were they in these hinges in North America, are they using timber instead of stone because just the availability? Because what you see in Europe and in the Middle East is that they created stone circles, especially the ones we're familiar with in the UK, right? But there's not a lot of stone circles. I think these are more earthworks, right? So were they using timber potentially or hypothetically?
Where did the stones get moved
for the standing stone? For what would be like a standing stone, or was it just geometrically the same, but they didn't have the stonework?
In England, around 1200 BC. Now we're looking at the end of the megalithic era. So hinges over there went from having stone circles within this circular platform in the middle to burial mounds being placed in the center. And then sometimes they would have a wood structure in the center as well. And that's what we find as well in the Ohio Valley. So the reason we don't have stone circle is because that era had ended.
Oh, I see.
And it had ended over in England. And it ended here as well. Well, it actually never started here because it was after that date. So that was a transition out of the megalithic, and now we're just dealing with earthworks on their own.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then the other about the charge, we know that they held water. And water is used as a barrier. So was it used to keep something out or to keep something in is the question.
Interesting. It's like a moat, right? It's like a castle moat.
Yeah. Well, that moat that goes around, you have your circular earthwork and then that deep ditch. So, that was filled with water. So, it was used to either keep something out or it was used to keep something in.
Yeah, the episode we did was like weather modification. Like the whole thing was there to like modify the weather and create more storms and create rainfall. It was kind of an original harp invention. To try to,
it was really interesting.
Yeah, so that was the theory of these areas were trying to call in more lightning, more activity, and manipulate sort of the environment and the weather around it. But who knows? I mean, obviously we know that whatever we're being told isn't the official story, right? I mean, and I guess one of the questions is like why are they so reluctant to cover up this part of history? I mean, you're describing the Amorites as a different species, almost completely different species, which is something that we talk about a lot on our show. Is that you would have some pretty insane commands by God to get rid of some of these things, and a lot of people now, modern day people, just interpret some of this Old Testament kind of monumental times as God being mean or
Genocidal.
Yeah. But these things don't sound like it's like a completely different.
It's a hybrid.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biblical story is really interesting because I think it's 2 or 3 times of God says about the Amorites, it's like, because the Amorites' iniquities are not yet full. So it's like he was always giving them a break. Like, all right, yeah, they did this, but the cup's not full yet. So, all right, let them go.